Illinois, like many states in the U.S., struggles with both alcohol and drug addiction. According to recent state public health reports, approximately 9 to 12% of adults in Illinois have experienced some form of substance use disorder, with alcohol being the most common. In urban centers such as Chicago, Rockford, and Peoria, higher population density correlates with higher rates of drug-related arrests and hospitalizations. Rural areas, including counties in southern Illinois like Alexander and Jackson, report lower population-based incidents but face challenges related to isolation, lack of healthcare access, and opioid abuse. Alcohol is the most widespread substance of misuse. According to the Illinois Department of Public Health, IDPH, 1 in 4 adults report binge drinking at least once a month. Excessive drinking contributes to traffic fatalities, domestic violence, and long-term health consequences such as liver disease and cardiovascular issues. Illicit drugs, including opioids, methamphetamines, cocaine, and marijuana, are also present. Opioid abuse has particularly devastated parts of Illinois, especially in rural and economically disadvantaged areas. Emergency room data shows thousands of opioid-related overdoses annually, with synthetic opioids like fentanyl contributing to an alarming rise in fatal cases. Types of substances. Alcohol. Alcohol misuse is prevalent across all demographics in Illinois. Urban nightlife contributes to recreational drinking in younger adults, while long-term dependence often develops among older populations. Bars, nightclubs, and festivals provide easy access to alcohol, but the state's liquor laws also restrict sales after certain hours, which has limited but not eliminated excessive drinking. Opioids and prescription drugs. Illinois has been deeply affected by the nationwide opioid crisis. Prescription opioids such as oxycodone and hydrocodone have been widely available in the past decades, leading to dependence in both urban and rural populations. Rural counties face additional challenges, as residents often must travel long distances for treatment programs, increasing the risk of untreated addiction and overdose. Methamphetamines and cocaine. Methamphetamine abuse has historically been more common in rural Illinois. Its production and distribution are relatively easier to conceal in low-population areas. Cocaine and crack cocaine are concentrated in urban environments, often correlating with poverty and gang activity. Marijuana. While recreational marijuana is legal in Illinois, misuse and dependence are still reported. Many users consider it a lower-risk substance, but research indicates potential cognitive and mental health consequences for heavy users. Social and economic consequences. The impact of substance abuse and alcoholism extends far beyond the individual. In Illinois, communities experience crime. Addiction often fuels property crimes, theft, and drug-related offenses. Areas with high unemployment and poverty see higher rates of illegal substance sales. Healthcare strain. Hospitals and emergency services in both urban and rural counties frequently manage overdose cases, alcoholic liver disease, and complications from intravenous drug use, such as infections and HIV/hepatitis C transmission. Family and community impact. Addiction disrupts family stability, with increased rates of domestic violence, child neglect, and homelessness in heavily affected areas. For example, rural southern Illinois has seen families fractured by opioid addiction, while urban Chicago neighborhoods contend with gang-related drug distribution networks that exacerbate violence and addiction simultaneously. State programs and intervention. Illinois has implemented several strategies to address substance abuse. Treatment centers. From urban rehabilitation centers in Chicago to smaller clinics in rural counties, the state provides medical and behavioral support for addiction recovery. Needle exchange programs. To reduce the spread of infectious diseases among intravenous drug users, Illinois supports safe needle programs in high-risk communities. Public awareness campaigns. The state promotes education about alcohol abuse and prescription drug dangers through school programs. Social media campaigns, and public service announcements. Naloxone availability. Illinois has expanded access to naloxone, Narcan, for opioid overdoses, particularly in communities with high overdose rates. Despite these efforts, gaps remain, particularly in rural regions where transportation limitations, stigma, and lack of specialized healthcare providers hinder effective intervention. Real-life stories. Across Illinois, individuals' experiences reveal the human side of addiction. In Chicago, Young adults describe the ease of alcohol access in nightlife districts like River North and Wicker Park, which can quickly lead to binge drinking and dependence. In Peoria, parents recount the devastation of opioid addiction on teenagers and young adults, highlighting the silent epidemic in smaller cities. In rural Alexander County, residents often must drive hours to access rehabilitation services, with long waiting lists worsening the problem. Recovery success stories also exist. Community support groups, faith-based programs, and public rehabilitation initiatives have helped thousands reclaim their lives. Illinois organizations such as Shatterproof Illinois and local Alcoholics Anonymous chapters provide resources that combine counseling, medical treatment, and peer support. Alcohol and drug culture in nightlife. In Illinois, nightlife and youth culture play a substantial role in substance exposure. College campuses, urban bars, and music festivals are hubs for recreational alcohol and occasional illicit drug use. While most experiences remain recreational and controlled, some individuals progress to dependence due to peer pressure, mental health struggles, or pre-existing vulnerability. Nightclubs in downtown Chicago, for example, often encourage excessive drinking as part of the social scene. Similarly, smaller towns with fewer entertainment options sometimes normalize alcohol consumption at local bars or parties, contributing to early-age exposure and long-term risks. Challenges and outlook. Substance abuse in Illinois is complicated by several factors. Economic inequality. Poverty correlates strongly with addiction, as residents may turn to drugs or alcohol as coping mechanisms. Urban-rural divide. Urban centers face gang-related drug distribution, while rural areas struggle with isolation and limited healthcare. Mental health. Many cases of addiction are intertwined with untreated mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and trauma. Policy limitations. While Illinois has progressive harm reduction policies, enforcement and access remain uneven across the state. Moving forward, experts suggest that comprehensive strategies are essential, including expanded treatment access, public education, social support programs, and harm reduction initiatives, to reduce both the prevalence of addiction and its devastating social consequences. Illinois is often recognized for its economic, political, and historical significance, but the state's cultural identity is equally rich and diverse. From the jazz clubs and museums of Chicago to the local festivals, folk traditions, and arts communities in rural areas, Illinois culture is a blend of historical heritage, modern creativity, and community resilience. Understanding the cultural landscape of Illinois requires looking beyond the urban centers to the rural counties, where traditions and local arts play a vital role in shaping the state's identity. Urban cultural hubs. Chicago, music, art, and nightlife. Chicago, the state's largest city, is a cultural powerhouse with a long history of artistic innovation. The city's music scene has produced world-renowned genres like blues, jazz, house, and gospel. Neighborhoods such as South Side, Wicker Park, and Hyde Park host historic venues where local legends began their careers. Blues and jazz, legendary clubs like the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge have preserved the jazz heritage of the city. Blues and jazz are not just entertainment, they tell stories of migration, racial struggles, and community identity, reflecting the city's complex social history. House music. Chicago is the birthplace of house music, which emerged in the 1980s in underground clubs. Today, house and electronic music thrive in venues across the city, influencing nightlife culture and attracting international DJs. Hip-hop and rap. Chicago has also contributed significantly to hip-hop, producing influential artists whose lyrics often reflect real-life urban challenges such as poverty, violence, and social injustice. The visual arts scene in Chicago is equally vibrant. The Art Institute of Chicago is world-famous, housing masterpieces from Monet to Hopper. At the same time, street art and murals in neighborhoods like Pilsen offer contemporary, often politically charged expressions that reflect community struggles, immigration narratives, and identity. Festivals and public events. Illinois hosts numerous festivals that celebrate music, film, literature, and food. Chicago's Lollapalooza draws tens of thousands of attendees every year, while Chicago Blues Festival honors the city's musical roots. The Chicago Air and Water Show and holiday parades also serve as important cultural gatherings, blending local pride with tourism. Festivals in smaller cities, such as the Peoria Riverfront Festival or Carbondale's Southern Illinois Music Festival, showcase regional music, crafts, and community traditions, reinforcing cultural ties outside the major urban centers. Rural and suburban cultural life. While Chicago dominates Illinois' cultural perception, rural and suburban areas have distinct cultural identities that are often overlooked. In southern Illinois, for example, local music traditions, folk festivals, and agricultural fairs remain central to community life. Many rural counties host annual fairs that feature crafts, traditional cooking, livestock competitions, and local musicians, sustaining regional heritage and intergenerational connections. Craftsmanship and folk art. Rural communities maintain local traditions in woodworking, quilting, and handmade goods, which often find audiences in local markets and regional exhibitions. Storytelling and oral history. Illinois' rural communities preserve history through storytelling, local theater, and community events, emphasizing identity and shared memory in ways that urban life cannot replicate. Suburban areas, particularly around Chicago, combine urban influence with community-oriented cultural practices. Local theaters, high school performing arts programs, and suburban music venues create cultural microcosms that feed into broader state identity. Culinary culture. Illinois' culinary landscape mirrors its cultural diversity. Chicago-style deep dish pizza, Italian beef sandwiches, and Chicago-style hot dogs are iconic urban foods. Yet, the state also offers regional specialties shaped by agricultural production and immigrant communities. Southern Illinois features small-town diners with classic American comfort foods, while rural areas are known for farm-to-table cuisine and locally sourced ingredients. Cultural festivals often highlight regional foods, creating opportunities for both preserving traditions and innovating new flavors. Cultural challenges and social reflection. Illinois' culture cannot be separated from its social realities. Substance abuse, poverty, racial segregation, and economic inequality deeply influence the arts and cultural expression. Urban expression. In Chicago, murals, music, and theater often address themes of inequality, community resilience, and the urban experience, turning struggle into art. Hip-hop, graffiti, and spoken word become outlets for youth navigating crime, poverty, and systemic challenges. Rural perspectives. In rural Illinois, culture frequently revolves around community solidarity. Folk festivals, county fairs, and local music serve not only as entertainment but also as mechanisms to cope with social isolation, economic uncertainty, and limited access to healthcare or educational resources. The contrast between urban and rural cultural life highlights how geography, economics, and social context shape identity. Cities tend to produce cutting-edge, often globally influential art, while rural areas focus on preservation, local storytelling, and community cohesion. Together, these experiences reflect a state that is diverse. Sometimes divided, yet bound by shared history and cultural adaptation. Education, museums, and libraries. Illinois has invested in cultural education through public and private institutions. Libraries, Chicago Public Library System and regional libraries in Springfield, Naperville, and Peoria provide not only books but access to arts programming, workshops, and community events. Museums. Beyond the Art Institute, institutions like the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, Illinois State Museum, and smaller local museums educate residents about both local and global culture. Cultural programs in schools, music, theater, and visual arts remain central to many schools, particularly in urban districts, giving youth a way to engage creatively despite economic or social challenges. Immigrant and minority cultural contributions. Illinois' cultural identity is deeply influenced by immigration. Polish, Italian, Mexican, African American, and Asian communities have all contributed significantly. Polish and Italian festivals, particularly in Chicago, traditional parades, feasts, and religious celebrations highlight these communities' enduring presence. Mexican influence. Pilsen and Little Village neighborhoods showcase Mexican murals, cuisine, and music, contributing to Chicago's vibrant cultural landscape. African American legacy. From jazz and blues to gospel and modern urban arts, African American communities have profoundly shaped music, theater, and visual art in Illinois. Tourism versus local culture. Tourism often emphasizes Chicago's skyline, Navy Pier, and major festivals. Yet the authentic culture of Illinois is found in local events, small venues, and everyday life across urban and rural areas. Visitors rarely see folk festivals in small towns, regional crafts, or the deeply embedded musical heritage outside famous venues. Similarly, locals often navigate nightlife, artistic spaces, and cultural events differently than tourists, with lived experience influencing engagement with art, music, and traditions. Cultural resilience and future trends. Despite social and economic challenges, including addiction, poverty, and crime, Illinois' culture remains resilient. Artists, musicians, and community organizers continue to adapt, innovate, and preserve traditions. Trends such as public art projects, urban murals, music collectives, and community-driven festivals reflect a growing emphasis on participation, inclusivity, and social commentary. Looking forward, Illinois' cultural identity will continue to evolve along several lines. Integration of digital and physical arts, with online platforms showcasing local talent. Expanded recognition of minority and immigrant contributions, ensuring that cultural narratives are more representative. Community-driven cultural resilience, where art, music, and local traditions address social challenges and foster cohesion. Illinois' nightlife is as diverse as its population and geography. While Chicago dominates the state's party scene with its clubs, bars, and music venues, smaller cities like Springfield, Peoria, and Naperville offer their own versions of social life. Understanding nightlife in Illinois requires looking at urban density, cultural trends, legal regulations, and social realities. Urban nightlife, Chicago. Chicago is famous for its nightlife, attracting locals, students, and tourists alike. Popular areas include River North, Wicker Park, Logan Square, and the South Loop, each with a distinct vibe. River North, known for upscale bars, cocktail lounges, and rooftop venues. Drinks are expensive, cocktails often $12 to $18. Dress codes and cover charges make it an adult-oriented scene. Wicker Park and Logan Square, trendier, hipster-friendly bars and music venues. Local bands perform in small spaces, cocktails are slightly cheaper, $8 to $12, but venues are packed on weekends. South Loop, emerging nightlife district, home to several clubs and lounges catering to younger professionals and students. Nightlife in Chicago is not just about fun, it's a lens into urban social dynamics. Clubs often double as networking spaces, but they are also hotspots for petty crime, theft, and occasionally violent incidents. Particularly late at night. City police and private security patrol high-traffic nightlife districts, but risks remain, especially for those unfamiliar with local norms. Nightlife in other Illinois cities. Outside Chicago, nightlife is more subdued but still socially significant. Springfield, local bars, breweries, and live music venues. College students from University of Illinois Springfield often drive the scene. Peoria, mix of dive bars, breweries, and small concert venues. Lower drink prices and a more relaxed vibe compared to Chicago. Suburban areas, nightlife often revolves around restaurants, pubs, and private events. Clubs are rarer, so social life focuses on small gatherings. In rural Illinois, nightlife is minimal. Friday nights are often spent in local bars or community halls, sometimes centered around karaoke, live music, or small-town festivals. Alcohol is widely consumed, and excessive drinking is a common coping mechanism for social isolation or stress. Prostitution and the sex industry in Illinois. Prostitution is illegal throughout Illinois, but the sex industry persists, often in hidden or online forms. Understanding this reality requires distinguishing between legal frameworks, economic pressures, and personal safety concerns. Street-level and hidden work. Street-level prostitution exists, though it is heavily policed in urban centers. Common areas in Chicago and some suburban districts see occasional street activity, often linked with drug use, poverty, or homelessness. Individuals involved in street-level work face high risks. Arrests and criminal records. Violence from clients or gangs. Exploitation or coercion. Street-based sex work is more common in economically distressed neighborhoods, where opportunities for stable employment are limited. Rural Illinois sees less street-level work but experiences similar issues with isolation and lack of social services for those involved. Online and escort services. Many sex workers in Illinois operate online via escort websites, social media, or apps, which allow relative anonymity and higher earnings. Prices vary widely. Basic encounters, $50 to $150. Premium services, longer sessions or higher discretion $200 plus. Online work is less visible but still illegal if it involves solicitation or prostitution. Legal risks exist for both providers and clients. Safety and health concerns. Sex work in Illinois carries serious risks. Public health organizations note high vulnerability to assault and robbery. Mental health challenges including anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Exposure to STDs and limited access to healthcare. Harm reduction initiatives, though limited, include counseling services, health clinics, and support networks for exiting the industry. Safety in Illinois. Safety varies dramatically across the state. Crime rates are highly localized. Chicago, some neighborhoods experience higher violent crime, South Side, West Side. Property crimes and petty theft are common in nightlife districts and tourist areas. Gang activity and drug-related violence affect certain neighborhoods. Suburbs, generally safer, but incidents of theft, DUI, and assault occur. Risk is lower than in urban centers. Rural areas, low violent crime overall, but isolation, lack of emergency services, and occasional drug-related issues create unique challenges. Tips for navigating Illinois safely. Avoid walking alone at night in unfamiliar neighborhoods. Use official taxis, Uber, or Lyft instead of hitchhiking. Be aware of surroundings in nightlife districts. Lock doors and monitor personal property, particularly in urban apartments or public events. Strange and outdated laws in Illinois. Illinois has some bizarre, outdated, or overly specific laws that remain technically on the books, even if rarely enforced. Animal-related rules: it's illegal to give a dog whiskey. Public behavior: in some cities, it's illegal to shoot animals from a moving vehicle, even if for pest control. Odd prohibitions: in Chicago, carrying a concealed slingshot without a license is prohibited. Alcohol laws: some counties remain dry or restrict sales in unusual ways, affecting bar hours or Sunday drinking. Nighttime restrictions: certain municipalities limit when loud music or public gatherings can occur, technically enforceable but inconsistently applied. These laws often reflect historical concerns, e.g., controlling liquor consumption or hunting practices, but persist alongside modern urban life. Conclusion. Illinois' real-life culture, nightlife, and social challenges reflect a mix of wealth, poverty, history, and modern urbanization. Nightlife is vibrant yet risky, the sex industry persists under legal restrictions, safety varies widely, and strange laws highlight the state's historical quirks. Understanding Illinois requires looking at both urban hubs and rural areas, where economic conditions, social support, and cultural practices shape everyday life. Homelessness is a persistent social issue across Illinois, affecting urban centers, suburbs, and even rural areas. According to the Illinois Coalition for the Homeless, tens of thousands of people experience homelessness each year, though exact numbers fluctuate due to seasonal changes and reporting methods. Homelessness in Illinois is multifaceted, encompassing those living on the streets, in shelters, or temporarily with friends and family, so-called couchsurfing. Urban homelessness, Chicago and beyond. Chicago has the largest homeless population in Illinois, concentrated in neighborhoods such as the Loop, West Side, and South Side, particularly near transportation hubs, parks, and underpasses. Homeless individuals face a combination of risks. Exposure to weather: winters in Chicago can be deadly, with temperatures dropping below zero and high wind chills. Health issues: poor nutrition, lack of access to healthcare, mental illness, and substance abuse exacerbate vulnerability. Crime and exploitation: homeless individuals are often victims of theft, assault, and scams, especially around nightlife areas and tourist districts. Shelters in Chicago provide temporary relief, but beds are limited. Organizations like the Night Ministry and Chicago Coalition for the Homeless offer services ranging from emergency housing to healthcare and job assistance. Despite this, demand often exceeds supply, leading to significant numbers sleeping outdoors or in unsafe conditions. Other urban centers such as Peoria, Rockford, and Springfield also face homelessness, though populations are smaller. Limited public transportation and fewer social services in these cities make life on the streets more precarious. Suburban and rural homelessness. Homelessness in suburban and rural Illinois is less visible but no less serious. Individuals may live in abandoned buildings, vehicles, or makeshift shelters in forests or along highways. Access to social services is limited. Rural counties like Alexander, Jackson, and Pulaski have few shelters or support programs. Transportation challenges hinder access to healthcare, employment, and food assistance. Stigma and isolation exacerbate mental health issues. Causes and contributing factors. Homelessness in Illinois is influenced by multiple overlapping factors. Economic inequality, high housing costs, unemployment, and underemployment push individuals into homelessness. Substance abuse, addiction and dependence often correlate with long-term homelessness. Mental health issues. Many individuals face untreated mental illness, which complicates efforts to secure stable housing. Domestic violence. Victims, particularly women and children, may leave unsafe situations without safe alternatives. Prices for sex work in Illinois. Despite prostitution being illegal across Illinois, the sex industry is active, often operating online, in private arrangements, or through escort services. Prices vary depending on location, discretion, and service type. Street-based work. Street-level sex work exists mainly in urban centers like Chicago, Rockford, and Peoria, though it is heavily policed. Prices at this level are lower due to risk and accessibility. Short encounters, $50 to $100. Longer sessions or repeat clients, $150 to $200. Risk of arrest or violence is high, especially in districts with active police presence or gang activity. Online and escort services. Online platforms have changed the dynamics of sex work in Illinois, allowing workers to advertise discreetly and negotiate higher prices. Standard sessions, $100 to $200. Premium services, $250 to $500 plus, depending on location, discretion, and client expectations. Safety concerns remain significant, including potential scams, assault, and legal consequences. Regional differences. Chicago and suburban areas, prices tend to be higher due to increased demand, larger population, and higher cost of living. Rural Illinois, services are rarer, risk is higher, and prices may vary, sometimes surprisingly high due to scarcity and travel costs. Sex work in Illinois is not only a legal issue but also a social and public health concern. Organizations that provide outreach, counseling, and healthcare access aim to reduce harm and support individuals in transitioning out of the industry if desired. Nightlife costs in Illinois. Nightlife in Illinois ranges from budget-friendly bars in small towns to luxury rooftop clubs in Chicago. Understanding costs requires examining urban, suburban, and rural contexts. Chicago nightlife costs. Chicago is the state's nightlife capital. Cocktails, $12 to $18 on average, high-end clubs may charge $20 plus. Beer, $6 to $10 per pint in bars, $3 to $5 in dive bars or breweries. Cover charges, $10 to $40 for popular clubs, sometimes higher for celebrity DJs or events. Transportation, Uber/Lyft rides from nightlife districts can range $15 to $35 depending on distance. Parking in the Loop can cost $20 plus per night. Special events like Lollapalooza, Chicago Blues Festival, or private club parties can significantly increase costs due to tickets, VIP areas, and alcohol consumption. Suburban and small city costs. Bars and pubs, drinks range $5 to $12, cover charges are rare. Local music venues, tickets for live shows often $10 to $25. Transportation, less expensive than urban centers, driving is common, but ride-sharing may be needed for late nights. Rural nightlife costs. Rural Illinois has minimal nightlife infrastructure. Local bars and community events dominate. Drinks, $3 to $7 for beer, $5 to $10 for cocktails. Entertainment, often includes karaoke, local bands, or seasonal festivals. Transportation, driving is essential, drinking and driving laws are strictly enforced, though enforcement varies by county. Summary: Illinois' real-life social dynamics reflect a complex mix of urban and rural experiences. Homelessness, substance abuse, and sex work coexist with vibrant nightlife and cultural expression, shaped by economic conditions, geography, and local traditions. Costs for nightlife and services vary dramatically based on location, and safety risks are highest in urban areas but present everywhere. Understanding Illinois' social fabric requires considering both the visible urban culture of Chicago and the hidden struggles of suburban and rural communities, where resources are limited but resilience and community networks persist. Illinois is a state of contrasts. On one hand, it is home to bustling urban centers, historic landmarks, and cultural icons. On the other hand, it faces deep social challenges: homelessness, substance abuse, economic inequality, and hidden industries that few tourists or outsiders ever see. Understanding Illinois requires examining both its urban vibrancy and the struggles of its suburban and rural communities. This guide explores the state's real-life experiences, from nightlife and culture to the hidden underbelly of drugs, sex work, and street life. Nightlife in Illinois. Illinois' nightlife reflects the diversity of its cities, towns, and rural regions. Chicago dominates the state's social scene with its clubs, bars, and music venues, while smaller cities like Springfield, Peoria, Naperville, and even rural towns maintain more modest, community-driven nightlife. Urban nightlife. In Chicago, neighborhoods each have their own vibe. River North, upscale lounges, rooftop bars, cocktail prices $12 to $18, dress codes, and cover charges up to $40. Wicker Park and Logan Square, trendy bars with local bands, cocktails $8 to $12, packed on weekends. South Loop, emerging nightlife for younger professionals and college students. Urban nightlife offers more than entertainment, it is also a lens into social dynamics. Clubs are hubs for social networking, but also locations where petty theft, scams, and occasional violence occur. Police presence is strong in nightlife districts, but risks remain for those unfamiliar with the city's unwritten rules. Suburban and rural nightlife. Outside Chicago, nightlife is smaller in scale. Suburban bars and music venues, drinks $5 to $12, events cost $10 to $25. Rural towns, Friday night gatherings are often at local bars, community halls, or seasonal festivals. Drinks $3 to $7 for beer, $5 to $10 for cocktails. Social life is closely tied to community events. Transportation is a key factor. Urban areas rely on ride-sharing services like Uber or Lyft, $15 to $35 for typical trips, while rural areas depend on personal vehicles. Driving under the influence remains a major safety concern across the state. Substance abuse and alcoholism. Illinois faces significant challenges with drug and alcohol addiction. While Chicago draws attention due to its population, substance abuse exists statewide, including suburban and rural areas. Alcohol. Most widespread substance of misuse. Binge drinking affects roughly 25% of adults statewide. Urban nightlife, festivals, and college towns increase exposure. Long-term effects include liver disease, heart problems, and social consequences like domestic disputes. Illicit drugs. Opioids, particularly devastating in rural southern Illinois, e.g., Alexander, Jackson counties. Overdose deaths have risen sharply in the past decade. Methamphetamines, more common in rural areas, relatively easy to produce in small-scale labs. Cocaine and crack, concentrated in urban centers, often linked with gang activity. Marijuana, legal recreationally, yet heavy users face cognitive and mental health risks. Social consequences. Increased crime, theft, and gang-related incidents. Strain on healthcare systems, overdoses, infections from intravenous drug use, mental health crises. Family instability and community challenges, particularly in economically disadvantaged areas. Intervention programs. Illinois has implemented several harm reduction measures. Treatment centers across urban and rural areas. Needle exchange programs and public health campaigns. Naloxone distribution for opioid overdoses. Community and faith-based recovery programs offering counseling, medical support, and peer networks. Homelessness. Homelessness is widespread across Illinois, affecting cities, suburbs, and rural areas. According to the Illinois Coalition for the Homeless, tens of thousands experience homelessness yearly. Urban homelessness. Chicago is the epicenter, especially near the Loop, South Side, and West Side. Shelters exist but cannot accommodate all individuals. Outdoor sleeping remains common. Risks include exposure to extreme weather, crime, and health problems. Suburban and rural homelessness. Less visible but severe. Makeshift shelters, vehicles, or abandoned buildings are common. Limited access to healthcare, social services, and food. Causes. Poverty and unemployment. Substance abuse and mental health issues. Domestic violence and lack of affordable housing. Sex work and prostitution. Prostitution is illegal throughout Illinois, yet the industry persists, both street-level and online. Street-based work. Present in urban centers, Chicago, Rockford, Peoria. Prices range from $50 to $200 depending on duration and risk. High exposure to violence, theft, and arrest. Online and escort services. Allows anonymity and higher earnings, $100 to $500 plus depending on discretion and service. Safety risks include scams, assault, and legal consequences. Rural differences. Less common, but scarcity can drive up prices. Isolation increases safety risks. Safety. Safety across Illinois is uneven. Urban areas, higher violent crime and gang activity. Suburbs, lower crime but occasional theft, DUI, and assault. Rural, low violent crime overall, but limited access to emergency services and occasional drug-related crime. Precautions include avoiding walking alone at night, using official transportation, and securing personal property. Culture and arts. Illinois' culture is rich and diverse, reflecting urban innovation and rural tradition. Music. Chicago, blues, jazz, house, gospel, and hip-hop. Historic venues like Green Mill Lounge preserve the city's musical heritage. Rural areas, folk, country, and regional music dominate festivals and local events. Visual arts. Museums, Art Institute of Chicago, Illinois State Museum, MCA Chicago. Street art, Pilsen and Wicker Park feature murals reflecting social issues and community identity. Folk art and craftsmanship thrive in rural counties. Festivals and community events. Urban festivals, Lollapalooza, Chicago Blues Festival, Air and Water Show. Rural and suburban festivals, county fairs, harvest celebrations, local music events. Immigrant and minority contributions. Polish, Italian, Mexican, and African American communities influence food, music, and visual arts. Neighborhoods like Pilsen and Little Village showcase murals, cuisine, and community traditions. Social influence. Culture in Illinois often mirrors social struggles. Urban art and music reflect poverty, gang influence, and addiction. Rural traditions emphasize community solidarity and coping mechanisms for economic hardship. Strange and outdated laws. Illinois still has unusual or outdated laws. Illegal to give a dog whiskey. Carrying a concealed slingshot without a license is prohibited. Some counties have odd restrictions on alcohol sales and noise at night. These laws are mostly remnants of historical concerns but remain technically enforceable. Costs in nightlife and social activities. Chicago, cocktails $12 to $18, beer $6 to $10, club covers $10 to $40, Uber $15 to $35. Suburbs, drinks $5 to $12, live music tickets $10 to $25, less frequent nightlife. Rural areas, drinks $3 to $10, entertainment usually local bands or community events. Sex work costs vary from $50 to $500 depending on service type and location. Conclusion. Illinois is a state of extremes. Vibrant nightlife, world-class culture, and historic music coexist with homelessness, substance abuse, and hidden social challenges. Life varies dramatically depending on urban, suburban, or rural location, economic status, and social networks. The state's resilience lies in its communities, cultural heritage, and the efforts of social organizations addressing addiction, homelessness, and inequality. Understanding Illinois means seeing both the surface glamour of urban life and the hidden realities faced by thousands across the state, nightlife and youth culture. Case 1, Chicago, River North. Alex, a 23-year-old marketing intern, spends weekends hopping bars in River North. Drinks average $15 each, and cover charges often exceed $20. While he enjoys the music and social networking, he admits, it's easy to lose track of time and money. I've seen people get pickpocketed, and fights can break out after midnight. You always have to watch your drinks and friends. Alex represents many young adults navigating Chicago's vibrant but risky nightlife. The scene is thrilling, but overconsumption of alcohol and the pressure to keep up financially create stress and occasional danger. Case 2, Peoria, downtown bars. Maria, a 28-year-old teacher in Peoria, attends live music nights at a local bar. Drinks cost $6 to $8, and shows are around $15. Unlike Chicago, Peoria's nightlife is smaller and more community-driven. People know each other, but opportunities for anonymity, positive or negative, are limited. It's fun, but there's no escaping if things go wrong, she says. Rural towns have even smaller social hubs, often revolving around Friday night bar gatherings or seasonal fairs. The stakes are lower financially but can still be socially intense in small communities. Addiction and substance abuse. Case 3, opioid addiction in southern Illinois. James, 35, grew up in Alexander County and struggled with opioid addiction for several years. Local jobs were scarce, and prescription painkillers were widely available. It started with pain meds after a work injury. Before I knew it, I was driving hours to get prescriptions and eventually using heroin because it was cheaper, he recalls. James eventually entered a rural rehab program funded by the state. Recovery was slow, and he notes, there's nowhere to go if you relapse. In small towns, everyone knows your business, and stigma is constant. This story highlights the rural opioid crisis, where isolation, limited healthcare, and social stigma amplify risks. Case 4, alcohol abuse in urban areas. Samantha, 42, lives on the south side of Chicago. Alcoholism affected her family for generations, and she began drinking heavily in her early 20s. Nightlife culture, peer pressure, and economic stress contributed. Even after realizing I had a problem, bars were everywhere. You see people drinking from morning to night, it feels normal until you hit rock bottom, she says. Support from counseling, AA meetings, and local shelters helped her regain stability, but many in similar circumstances never access help. Homelessness. Case 5, Chicago streets. Marcus, 29, has lived on the streets of the West Side for over 2 years. He describes sleeping near underpasses or abandoned buildings during winters. It's cold, scary, and lonely. You're always worried about someone stealing your bag or worse. The shelters help, but there's never enough space. Marcus represents thousands of urban homeless individuals navigating danger, exposure, and lack of access to healthcare. Many rely on food banks and outreach programs for survival. Case 6, rural homelessness. Anna, 31, lives in Jackson County and has no permanent home. She stays in an old van when she cannot find temporary shelter. You're invisible here. Nobody drives by a forested area thinking someone might be living there. Help is hours away by car. Rural homelessness is less visible but equally dangerous. Limited services and isolation make survival precarious, particularly in harsh weather. Sex work. Case 7, online escort in Chicago. Leah, 25, works primarily through online platforms to minimize risk. She charges $150 to $250 per session and operates discreetly. It's safer online, but there's always fear. You never know if a client is dangerous, or if someone will try to report you. The legal risks are real. Her experience shows how digital platforms have shifted sex work in Illinois, balancing higher earnings with ongoing safety and legal concerns. Case 8, Rural Sex Work. Tina, 30, lives in southern Illinois. Occasional clients approach her via word of mouth. Scarcity makes pricing higher, $200 to $400, but isolation also increases danger. There's nowhere to go if something goes wrong. No one checks in on you, and there's no network like in the city, she explains. Cultural engagement amid struggle. Even amid social challenges, Illinois residents find ways to engage with culture and art. Community theaters, street murals, local music, and county fairs serve as both creative outlets and social lifelines. Urban neighborhoods like Pilsen and Wicker Park use murals to reflect social issues and community identity. Rural towns rely on county fairs, folk music, and craft festivals to preserve tradition and strengthen social bonds. Music and art often serve as coping mechanisms for those affected by addiction, homelessness, or economic hardship. Key takeaways from real-life experiences. Nightlife is exciting but risky. Urban areas provide a playground for young adults, but alcohol and petty crime remain constant dangers. Addiction crosses urban-rural lines. Opioids, alcohol, and other drugs affect both city and countryside, with different social and healthcare challenges. Homelessness is widespread, both visible in cities and hidden in rural areas, often tied to poverty, substance abuse, and mental health. Sex work is complex and hidden. Legal risk, safety concerns, and economic necessity shape the industry across the state. Culture persists amid struggle. Art, music, and local traditions are resilient, providing identity, community, and coping mechanisms. Illinois is a state of extremes. From the bustling skyscrapers of Chicago to quiet rural towns along the Mississippi River, the state presents a mix of vibrant culture, nightlife, and hidden social struggles. Understanding Illinois requires seeing both the glamour of urban centers and the challenges of suburban and rural life. Nightlife across Illinois. Urban nightlife. Chicago dominates Illinois' nightlife. Popular districts include River North, Wicker Park, Logan Square, and the South Loop. River North, upscale lounges, rooftop bars, cocktails $12 to $18, cover charges $20 to $40. Wicker Park and Logan Square, trendy bars with live music, cocktails $8 to $12. Packed on weekends. South Loop, emerging nightlife for young professionals, mix of bars and lounges. Nightlife is both a social outlet and a risk zone. Alcohol, petty theft, and occasional violence are common. Observing safety practices, watching drinks, staying in groups, and using official transportation, is essential. Suburban and rural nightlife. Outside Chicago. Suburban bars and live music venues, drinks $5 to $12, live shows $10 to $25. Social scene is smaller, community-oriented. Rural towns, bars and community halls host karaoke, small concerts, or local festivals, drinks $3 to $10. Social life is tied to events rather than ongoing nightlife infrastructure. Transportation is critical. Urban nightlife often requires ride-sharing, $15 to $35, while rural and suburban areas rely on personal vehicles. Substance abuse and alcoholism. Illinois faces widespread substance use issues across urban, suburban, and rural areas. Alcohol, most common substance. Roughly 25% of adults binge drink monthly. Long-term effects include liver disease, heart issues, and social consequences. Opioids, a major concern in rural southern Illinois, e.g., Alexander County. Overdose deaths have risen sharply in recent years. Methamphetamines, primarily rural issue, small-scale production prevalent. Cocaine and crack, concentrated in urban areas, often linked to gang activity. Marijuana, legal recreationally, heavy use carries mental health risks. Social consequences include crime, family instability, health strain, and economic impact. Programs addressing these issues include treatment centers, needle exchanges, naloxone distribution, and public awareness campaigns. Homelessness in Illinois. Homelessness affects urban, suburban, and rural communities. Urban, Chicago sees the largest homeless population, concentrated near the Loop, South Side, and West Side. Risks include exposure, violence, and lack of medical access. Suburban, less visible, but residents rely on temporary shelters or friends/family. Rural, isolation, limited shelters, and transportation challenges exacerbate vulnerability. Causes include poverty, substance abuse, mental health issues, and domestic violence. Organizations like the Night Ministry and Chicago Coalition for the Homeless provide crucial support. Sex work in Illinois. Prostitution is illegal, but the industry persists. Street level, mostly in urban centers, prices $50 to $200 per session, high risk of arrest, violence, or exploitation. Online/escorts, safer and more discreet, $100 to $500 depending on service, location, and discretion. Rural areas, less frequent, prices often higher due to scarcity, isolation increases risk. Sex work intersects with substance abuse, poverty, and limited economic opportunity, requiring harm reduction and public health interventions. Safety across the state. Crime and safety vary. Urban, higher rates of violent crime, petty theft, and gang activity. Suburban, generally safer, occasional assault, DUI, or theft. Rural, low violent crime, but isolation and limited emergency services present risks. Safety strategies: avoid walking alone at night, secure personal property, and rely on official transportation. Culture and arts. Illinois is rich in culture, blending urban innovation with rural tradition. Music: Chicago is home to jazz, blues, house, gospel, and hip-hop. Rural areas focus on folk and country. Visual arts: museums like the Art Institute of Chicago and street murals in Pilsen reflect both historic and modern culture. Festivals: urban festivals include Lollapalooza and Chicago Blues Festival. Rural fairs celebrate agriculture, crafts, and local music. Immigrant communities: Polish, Italian, Mexican, and African American traditions shape neighborhoods, food, and art. Culture reflects social realities, often addressing poverty, substance abuse, and community struggles through music, murals, and theater. Strange and outdated laws. Illinois has some unusual laws still technically enforceable. Illegal to give a dog whiskey. Carrying a concealed slingshot without a license is prohibited. Some counties restrict alcohol sales on Sundays or enforce strict noise ordinances at night. Nightlife and sex work costs. Chicago cocktails, $12 to $18, beer $6 to $10, cover $10 to $40, Uber $15 to $35. Suburban drinks, $5 to $12, live music $10 to $25. Rural drinks, $3 to $10, entertainment mostly local bands or events. Sex work, $50 to $500 depending on location and service. Real-life stories. Urban nightlife: young adults enjoy Chicago clubs but face theft and alcohol-related risks. Addiction: rural opioid users and urban alcoholics struggle with social stigma and limited treatment access. Homelessness: both visible in cities and hidden in rural areas, often tied to poverty and substance abuse. Sex work: online platforms offer some safety and higher pay, rural workers face isolation and higher danger. Culture amid struggle: art, music, and festivals provide community and identity even amid hardship. Conclusion. Illinois is a state of vibrancy and challenge. Its nightlife, music, art, and festivals contrast sharply with the realities of homelessness, substance abuse, and illegal industries. Life varies dramatically by urban, suburban, and rural location, yet the state's resilience is found in its communities, culture, and ongoing social programs. Understanding Illinois requires seeing both the glamour and the grit, the visible and the hidden, across every corner of the state.